So hey guys, welcome to my channel. So in the very previous video we have discussed about the homeostasis, and in the particularly we have discussed about the kidney homeostasis, how kidney plays an important role in the homeostasis and the buffer mechanism, all that. And again we are going to revise about it, and we are going to discuss about the disorders of acid base balance. So let's begin. So maintenance of blood pH, how the pH is maintained. So the body has developed three lines of defense to regulate the body's acid base balance and maintain the blood pH. Around 7.4, the normal pH is about 7.34 to 7. So what is the normal pH range of normal pH? We'll be discussing about it in the latter part of the chapter. So here our body has developed three lines of defense. How many? Three lines of defense to regulate the body's acid base balance and maintain the blood pH. To regulate acid base balance and regulate the blood pH, our body has developed three lines of defense. Three lines of defense. One is blood buffers, respiratory mechanism, and renal mechanism. Respiratory mechanism, renal mechanism, and blood buffers. Blood buffers, respiratory mechanism, and renal mechanism. So let's first talk about the blood buffers. So our body has developed the defense mechanism, three lines of defense mechanism for the maintenance of acid base balance and the homeostasis of blood pH. So what are the three? Blood buffers, respiratory mechanism, and kidney. Role of renal mechanism, kidneys. Okay, so let's talk about blood buffers. A buffer is an aqueous solution of a weak acid, and it salts with a strong base, and it's salt with a strong base, or you can say a solution of a weak base and it's salt with a strong acid. Okay, weak base, a salt with a strong acid, or else weak acid, salt with a strong base. So a buffer is an aqueous solution of a weak acid and salt with a strong base, or solution of weak base, or it's a salt of a strong acid. So the buffer resists the change in pH by the addition of acid or alkali, and the buffering capacity is dependent on the absolute concentration of salt and acid. The buffering capacity depends on the absolute concentration of salt and acid. So first what you need to tell is a buffer is an aqueous solution of a weak acid and it's salt of a strong base, and salts with a strong base, or else a solution of a weak base and it's salt with a strong acid. So a buffer resists the change in pH by addition of small amount of acid or alkali. So a buffer resists the change in pH by the addition of acid or alkali. So the buffering capacity is dependent on the absolute concentration of salt and acid. It should be borne in mind that buffer cannot remove H plus ions from the body. It cannot remove. Only kidneys can remove, and by respiration H plus ions can be removed and carbon dioxide can be removed. By respiration H plus in the form of water and carbon dioxide is removed. So buffer cannot remove H plus ions from the body. It temporarily acts as a shock absorbent to reduce the free H plus ions. So a buffer cannot remove the H plus ions from the body, but it temporarily acts as a shock absorbent to reduce the free H plus ions. So it acts as a temporary shock absorbent to reduce free H plus ions. The H plus ions have to be ultimately eliminated by the renal mechanism. The H plus ions can be removed by the renal mechanism. The blood contains three buffer systems. So our blood contains three buffer systems. Our body contains three line of defense mechanism for the acid base balance, to regulate acid base balance and pH homeostasis. So similarly, a buffer system, we have three buffer systems: bicarbonate buffer, phosphate buffer, protein buffer. So we have three buffer systems: bicarbonate buffer, phosphate buffer, protein buffer. So we have three buffer systems: bicarbonate buffer, phosphate buffer, protein buffer. So we have three buffer system: bicarbonate buffer, phosphate buffer, and protein buffer. BPP, you can remember BPP. And for the defense line of three lines of defense for maintenance of blood pH, regulation of the body's acid base balance, and maintenance of blood pH, and 7.4 is the BRR, blood buffer, respiratory mechanism, renal mechanism. For buffer system, we have three: bicarbonate buffer, phosphate buffer, protein buffer. So bicarbonate buffer system, sodium bicarbonate and carbonic acid, that is NaHCO3 and H2CO3. Sodium bicarbonate and carbonic acid. H2CO3 is carbonic acid, NaHCO3 is sodium bicarbonate. So these is the most predominant buffer system of the extracellular fluid, particularly the plasma. Carbonic acid dissociates into hydrogen and bicarbonate ions. We know this, right? So there's all equation and all. If you want to write, you can write. So bicarbonate buffer system is nothing but sodium bicarbonate and carbonic acid. Sodium bicarbonate NaHCO3, carbonic acid H2CO3 is the predominant buffer system of the extracellular fluid, particularly the plasma. So carbonic acid dissociates into hydrogen and bicarbonate ions. Okay, but the law of mass action at equilibrium, you can write that Ka is dissociation constant of carbonic acid H2CO3. So Ka is equal to H plus, means products by reactants, H plus concentration into HCO3 minus bicarbonate ions concentration by carbonic acid concentration. The equation may be rewritten as H plus concentration, you can write as Ka into H2CO3 carbonic acid concentration by bicarbonate ion concentration, HCO3 minus ion concentration. So we know that pH is nothing but log of 1 by H plus. So you reverse this equation. Log of 1 by H plus is log of 1 by Ka plus log HCO3 minus, reverse you have to do, HCO3 minus by H2CO3 concentration. So log 1 by K is nothing but pK. So you can rewrite the equation as pH. Log 1 by H plus concentration is pH. pH is equal to log 1 by K concentration, nothing but pK. pH is equal to pK plus log HCO3 minus concentration by H2CO3 concentration. The above equation is valid for any buffer pair. For any buffer pair you can write. So HCO3 minus is the bicarbonate ion, that is the base. So the general equation required this equation is referred to as Henderson-Hasselbalch equation for any buffer, and we can write it as pH is equal to pK plus log base by acid. So this is Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. Which equation? Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. You can write pH is equal to pK plus log base by acid. This is Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. So it is evident from the equation that the pH is dependent on the ratio of the concentration of the base to acid. Concentration of base to acid. So HCO3 minus and H2CO3 in equation. So blood pH and the ratio of HCO3 minus to H2CO3. The plasma bicarbonate concentration is around 24 millimole per liter. Okay, so here you can say that the blood pH and the ratio of HCO3 minus to H2CO3, the plasma bicarbonate concentration is around 24 millimole per liter. So what is the plasma bicarbonate concentration? It ranges between 22 to 26 millimole per liter. You can take 24 millimole per liter, that is plasma bicarbonate concentration. Carbonic acid is a solution of carbon dioxide in water. So its concentration is given by the product of partial pressure of carbon dioxide, that is arterial partial pressure of carbon dioxide, that is 40 mmHg, and the solubility constant, that is 0.03. So this H2CO3 is nothing but concentration of H2CO3 is 1.2 millimole per liter. 40 into 0.03 is 1.2 millimole per liter. What is 0.03? That is solubility constant of carbon dioxide, because carbonic acid is nothing but the solution of carbon dioxide in water. So according to Henderson-Hasselbalch equation of bicarbonate buffer, you can write pH is equal to pK plus log bicarbonate ion concentration by carbonic acid concentration, that is base by acid. So substituting the values, blood pH is 7.4, pK for H2CO3 is 6.1, HCO3 minus is 24 millimole per liter, H2CO3 is 1.2 millimole per liter in the above equation. So 7.4 is equal to 6.1 plus log 24 by 1 by 1.2. So 6.1 plus log 20. So 6.1 plus 1.3, that is 7.4. Log 20 is 1.3. So 6.1 plus, that is H2CO3 concentration. What is H2CO3 concentration? pK of H2CO3. Actually 1.2 ka log if you will take 1 minute. So H2CO3 ka what concentration you will get, that is 6.1. Anti-log of 1.2, 6.1. Okay, HCO3 minus is 24 millimole per liter. So 24 by 1.2, you will get 6.1 plus log 20. 6.1 plus 1.3, 7.4. So it is evident that a blood pH of 7.4, the ratio of bicarbonate to carbonic acid should be 20:1. Bicarbonate to carbonic acid ratio should be 20:1 according to the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation ratio filtering. Thus the bicarbonate concentration is much higher, much higher than the carbonic acid in the blood. This is referred to as alkali reserve. So it means that bicarbonate concentration is higher when compared to carbonic acid. This is nothing but alkali reserve and is responsible for effective buffering of H plus ions generated in the body. So in normal circumstances, the concentration of bicarbonate and carbonic acid determines the pH of blood. So in normal circumstances, the concentration of bicarbonate and carbonic acid determines the pH of blood. Further, the bicarbonate buffer system serves as an index to understand the disturbances in the acid-base balance of the body. Okay? The bicarbonate buffer system serves as an index to understand the disturbances in the acid-base balance of the body. So it means we have more bicarbonate when compared to carbonic acid. So what is the take-home point? Take-home point is the bicarbonate to carbonic acid ratio is 20:1 to maintain the pH of 7.4 blood pH. So this means the bicarbonate concentration is much higher than the carbonic acid in the blood. So this is referred to as alkali reserve, and this is responsible for effective buffering action of H plus ions generated in the body. Normal circumstances, the concentration of bicarbonate to carbonic acid determines the blood pH. Further, the bicarbonate buffer system serves as an index to understand the disturbances in the acid-base balance of the body. The bicarbonate buffer system. Okay, so this is about the bicarbonate buffer system. We have used Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. We have derived the equation. How we have derived? By taking the carbonic acid H2CO3 and applying the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. pH is equal to pK plus log base by acid, Ba, base by acid, Ba, base by acid, and from there we have derived the values of the. We know that the plasma bicarbonate concentration of the blood at normal pH is 24 millimole per liter. 20 to 26 millimole per liter is the normal range of bicarbonate, and carbonic acid nothing but the carbon dioxide in water, a solution of carbon dioxide in water. So we have taken partial pressure of carbon dioxide, that is 40, and the solubility constant of carbon dioxide, that is 0.03. So by multiplying, we got 1.2 millimole per liter, which is the H2CO3 carbonic acid concentration. By Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, we have used the formula pH is equal to pK plus log base by acid. Base is bicarbonate ion HCO3 minus by H2CO3. So if we have take the anti-log of 1.2, we got 6.1. Okay, so by that we got the ratio of bicarbonate to carbonic acid, that is how much? That is 20:1. It means the bicarbonate concentration is high in the blood. It means this is the alkali reserve, and it is responsible for the effective buffering action of the H plus ions. The effective buffering action of the H plus ions. Okay, so this in normal circumstances, the bicarbonate to carbonic acid concentration determines the blood pH of the blood. Further, the bicarbonate buffer system is as an index to understand the disturbances in the acid-base balance of the body. So this is all about bicarbonate buffer system. By taking the ratio 20:1, we understand that there is an alkali reserve in the body which helps in the buffering of the H plus ions. Now talking about phosphate buffer system. So till then, 1 minute, I'll have water. Okay. Oh my god. Phosphate buffer system. We talked about phosphate buffer system: sodium dihydrogen phosphate and disodium hydrogen phosphate. The sodium dihydrogen phosphate and disodium hydrogen phosphate, NaH2PO4 and Na2HPO4. Sodium dihydrogen phosphate and sodium disodium hydrogen phosphate. In the bicarbonate buffer, we have seen sodium bicarbonate and carbonic acid, H2CO3 and NaHCO3. Sodium bicarbonate and carbonic acid. In phosphate buffer system, disodium hydrogen and sodium dihydrogen phosphates. Sodium dihydrogen phosphate, that is NaH2PO4. sodium dihydrogen phosphate NaH2PO4 and disodium hydrogen phosphate Na2HPO4 constitute the phosphate buffer. It is mostly an intracellular buffer and is of less importance in plasma due to its low concentration. So it is mostly an intracellular buffer and it is of less importance in plasma due to its low concentration. Because of its low concentration in plasma, it is less important, but it is intracellular buffer. It is important intracellularly. Okay? So with a pK of 6.8, close to blood pH 7.4. So the phosphate buffer would have been more effective had it been present in high concentration. So it is estimated that the ratio of base to acid for phosphate buffer is 4 compared to 20 for bicarbonate buffer. So that's why it's not very important in the plasma, because but it is intracellularly important because intracellular its concentration is high. But in the plasma its concentration is low. Its pK is 6.8. Its pK is 6.8 and the phosphate buffer would have been effective if it is present in high concentration. But it is estimated that the ratio of base to acid is only 4 when compared to 20 for carbonic acid, bicarbonate buffer. Okay? So that's why it's less. So what you need to remember in the phosphate buffer, the sodium dihydrogen phosphate, that is NaH2PO4, and disodium hydrogen phosphate, that is Na2HPO4, these act as the buffer. So it is intracellularly most important, but extracellularly in the plasma its concentration is low. Its pK is 6.8 and the phosphate buffer would have been effective its concentration is high in the plasma. But the estimated ratio of base to acid is only 4 when compared to the bicarbonate, that is 20. So it's not that effective. Okay. Now talking about protein buffer system, the plasma protein and hemoglobin. Talking about plasma protein and hemoglobin, together constitute the protein buffer system in the body. So protein buffer system is constituted by the plasma protein and hemoglobin. Plasma protein and hemoglobin, they constitute the protein buffer system of the body. The buffering capacity of protein is dependent on the pK of ionizable groups of amino acids, the imidazole group of histidine. So talking about the protein buffer system, the plasma protein and hemoglobin. The plasma protein and hemoglobin. The plasma protein and hemoglobin. The plasma proteins and hemoglobin, they work as protein buffer system. Plasma proteins and hemoglobin together constitute the protein buffer system of the blood. The buffering capacity of protein is dependent on the pK of ionizable groups of amino acids. So the buffering capacity of protein is dependent on the pK of ionizable groups of amino acids. What is the ionizable group? Imidazole group of histidine. Its pK is 6.7. So the most effective contributor of protein buffer is the imidazole group of histidine. The plasma protein account for about 2% of the total buffering capacity of the plasma. 2% plasma proteins. Hemoglobin of RBC is also an important buffer. It mainly buffers the fixed acids besides being involved in the transport of gases, oxygen, carbon dioxide. So about hemoglobin buffering action we will be seeing in the respiratory mechanism. So hemoglobin of RBC is also an important buffer. It mainly buffers the fixed acids besides being involved in the transport of gases. Okay. Talking about the protein buffer system, the plasma protein and the hemoglobin, they constitute the protein buffering system of the blood. So the buffering capacity of protein is dependent on pK of what? Ionizable group of amino acids. The imidazole group of histidine is the most effective contributor of protein buffer, and the plasma proteins account for 2% of the buffering action of the plasma, buffering capacity of the plasma. Hemoglobin of RBC is also important buffer, and it mainly buffers acids, fixed acids. Besides being involved in transport of gases, it helps in the buffering of the acids. So more detail we'll be seeing in the respiratory mechanism of pH regulation. So protein buffer system, the plasma protein and hemoglobin, they constitute the protein buffer system of the blood. The buffering capacity of protein is dependent on the pK value of the ionizable group of amino acids, that is the imidazole group of histidine, whose pK is 6.7. Okay, it is the most effective contributor of protein buffer, and the plasma proteins account for 2% of the buffering capacity of the plasma. Hemoglobin of RBC is also an important buffer. It fixes the acids, it buffers the acids besides transportation of gases, oxygen, carbon dioxide. So more detail we'll be seeing the respiratory mechanism of pH regulation. So this answer is quite long, and I'm talking about the respiratory action, and then we'll be talking about the renal action, and then disorders of acid-base balance. Okay, so we have seen the maintenance of buffer, blood pH, and acid-base balance by the three mechanisms, three lines of defense to regulate the acid-base balance and the pH homeostasis. What are the three? First is blood buffer, second is respiratory mechanism, and there is renal mechanism. And blood buffer, again three mechanisms are there. What is the three mechanism? First one is the bicarbonate buffer, second is phosphate buffer, third is protein and hemoglobin, plasma protein buffer mechanism, protein buffer system. In that we have seen plasma protein and hemoglobin. Bicarbonate buffer, sodium bicarbonate and the carbonic acid. Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, we have taken out the formula. pH is equal to pK plus log base by acid. So pK of carbonic acid we have seen, that is 6.2, and the base by acid ratio, bicarbonate by carbonic acid ratio is 20:1, and that's why there is more bicarbonate when compared to the acid, so it acts as alkali reserve and helps in the buffering action of the H+. Okay, and another is phosphate buffer. We have seen sodium dihydrogen phosphate, disodium hydrogen phosphate, but there pK of the pK is very less. pK is 6.8, but it is not very effective because the base by acid ratio is just 4, and that's why it's not very effective extracellularly, but intracellularly it is the most important. Protein buffer system, plasma protein and hemoglobin. And plasma protein, the ionizable part of the amino acid, its play action in the buffering action, that is the imidazole group of histidine, whose pK is 6.7, and it helps in the 2% of the buffering action of the plasma by plasma protein. Okay, and hemoglobin, it plays important role in buffering, besides carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide. It also helps in the fixing of acids, buffering of acids. So its important role is seen in respiratory mechanism of pH regulation. So this respiratory mechanism is quite hard. I like to make it easy. So concentrate. So respiratory mechanism of pH regulation. Respiratory system provides a rapid mechanism for the maintenance of acid-base balance. So respiratory system provides a rapid mechanism for the maintenance of acid-base balance. This is achieved by regulating the concentration of carbonic acid in the blood, that is the denominator in the bicarbonate buffer system. The details of carbon dioxide transport and the role of hemoglobin in this process are described. So what he is saying is, okay, respiratory system, it provides a rapid mechanism for maintenance of acid-base balance. For maintenance of acid-base balance, respiratory system plays an important role. So this is achieved by regulating the concentration of carbonic acid. This is achieved by regulating the concentration of carbonic acid H2CO3 in the blood, that is the denominator in the bicarbonate. So we are talking about the respiratory mechanism. Okay, so respiratory mechanism, it provides a rapid mechanism for maintenance of acid-base balance. It is a rapid. Respiratory is rapid. Okay. This is achieved by regulating the concentration of carbonic acid concentration in the blood, that is the denominator in the bicarbonate buffer system. The details of carbon dioxide transport and the role of hemoglobin in this process are described in chapter 10. So we'll be discussing it shortly. The large volumes of carbon dioxide produced by the cellular metabolic activity endanger the acid-base equilibrium of the body. The large volumes of carbon dioxide produced by the cellular metabolic activity endanger the acid-base equilibrium of the body, but in normal circumstances, all these carbon dioxide is eliminated from the body in the expired air by the lungs. So H2CO3, but carbonic anhydrase converts into carbon dioxide and water. The rate of respiration The rate of removal of carbon dioxide is controlled by the rate at which carbon dioxide should be removed is regulated by the respiratory centers present in the medulla oblongata of the brain. Medulla oblongata of the brain. Medulla oblongata of the brain. Okay. It is regulated by medulla oblongata of the brain. So this center is highly sensitive to charges in the pH of blood. Changes in the pH of blood. So this center is highly sensitive to changes in the pH of blood. This center is highly sensitive to changes in pH of the blood. So this center is highly sensitive to changes in the pH of the blood. This center is highly sensitive to changes in the pH of the blood. Any decrease in blood pH causes hyperventilation. So this center is highly sensitive to changes in the pH of the blood. So any decrease in blood pH causes hyperventilation to blow off the carbon dioxide, thereby reducing the H2CO3 concentration. Simultaneously, the H plus ions are eliminated as water. Respiratory control of blood pH is rapid but only a short-term regulatory process. This you need to remember. It is rapid but it is short-term regulatory process since hyperventilation cannot proceed for longer. Okay. Now let's talk about hemoglobin as a buffer. Let's talk about hemoglobin as a buffer. Hemoglobin of erythrocyte is also important in the respiratory regulation of pH. So this is important. This is complicated. Okay. So hemoglobin as a buffer you need to understand. Hemoglobin as a buffer, then you can see, so two mechanisms you can see. Hemoglobin as a buffer, and there is generation of bicarbonate by RBC. Okay, two things you can see. So hemoglobin as a buffer, hemoglobin of erythrocytes is also important in the respiratory regulation of pH. Hemoglobin of erythrocytes is also important in the respiratory regulation of pH. Hemoglobin as a buffer, if you see, hemoglobin of erythrocytes is also important in the respiratory regulation of pH. Hemoglobin of erythrocytes is also important in respiratory regulation of pH. At the tissue level, hemoglobin binds to H plus ions and helps to transport carbon dioxide as HCO3 minus with a minimum change in pH. This is referred to as isohydric transport. In the lungs, as hemoglobin combines with oxygen, H plus ions are removed, which combine with HCO3 minus to form H2CO3. This later dissociates to release carbon dioxide to be exhaled. So what happens here? Look at here. There is a tabular column here. There is a tabular thing. If you draw, there will be good. You will get fetch extra marks. So renal regulation of renal. Okay, oh sorry. Okay, 1 minute. So for understanding the hemoglobin as a buffer, we will be referring the chapter 10 of Satyanarayana. We are doing from Satyanarayana all this. In chapter 10 we will be understanding how hemoglobin plays an important role in maintenance of our pH. Let's see functions of hemoglobin, which is an important question. So if you see functions of hemoglobin is largely responsible for the transport of oxygen from lungs to tissues. Hemoglobin is largely responsible for the transport of oxygen from lungs to tissues. It also helps to transport carbon dioxide from tissues to lungs. Binding of oxygen to hemoglobin. One molecule of hemoglobin can bind with 4 molecules of oxygen. Okay, this is in contrast to one molecule of hemoglobin can bind with 4 molecules of oxygen. This is in contrast to myoglobin. One molecule of hemoglobin can bind with 4 molecules of oxygen. One molecule of hemoglobin can bind with 4 molecules of oxygen. So one molecule of hemoglobin binds with 4 molecules of oxygen. This we know. एक हीमोग्लोबिन 4 ऑक्सीजन के साथ बाइंड कर सकता है, एक नहीं, दो नहीं, चार ऑक्सीजन के साथ एक हीमोग्लोबिन मॉलिक्यूल बाइंड कर सकता है. Because one hemoglobin consists of 4 hemes, that's why it can bind with 4 oxygens. 4 molecules of oxygen, not 4 oxygen, 4 molecules of oxygen. So one heme with one molecule. So this is in contrast to myoglobin, which consists of only one heme, which can bind with only one molecule of oxygen. In other words, each heme moiety can bind with one oxygen. One heme moiety, one oxygen molecule. We have different types of hemoglobin: HbA1, HbA2, HbF, HbA1c, all that. Okay, so oxygen dissociation curve, if you see, it's very important. Okay, we have to see one more thing now, that is Rappaport-Liebring cycle. What is methemoglobin, guys? See, for the transport of the oxygen, the iron should be in the ferrous state, Fe+2. But if it is oxidized to methemoglobin, Fe+3, which is prevented by the vitamin C in normal circumstances. However, molecule does not oxidize hemoglobin, it only loosely binds to form oxyhemoglobin. The oxidation of hemoglobin to methemoglobin may be caused in the living system by H2O2, free radicals and drugs. The methemoglobin is unable to bind to oxygen. Instead, a water molecule occupies the oxygen site in the heme of methemoglobin. So in normal circumstances, the occasional oxidation of hemoglobin is corrected by enzyme methemoglobin reductase present in the erythrocytes. So that is the methemoglobin. Methemoglobin is nothing but the oxidation of Fe+2 to Fe+3, and this is because of the H2O2 free radicals drugs. But normally it can be inhibited by the methemoglobin reductase, which reduce the methemoglobin to back to hemoglobin by taking NADH+. Okay, and talking about oxygen dissociation curve, the binding ability of hemoglobin with oxygen at different partial pressures of oxygen, the binding ability of hemoglobin with oxygen. We are talking about functions of hemoglobin. Okay. So we know that one heme moiety binds with one oxygen. So hemoglobin consists of 4 heme moieties, so it binds with 4 molecules of oxygen. Whereas myoglobin has only one heme, so it binds with only one oxygen molecule. We'll continue later because there is namaz time. So we'll continue later. Thank you.